Welcome to Saltier Politics. Right now we have Julie and her good friend Aly.
Well, first, I'm really thrilled you said my name correctly, so that is kudos to you. Julie and I have known each other a really long time, so long that I can't remember half of the dirt I have to share with you, so I'll just refrain or else I'll get kicked off. But
go ahead. It's fine. It's good. There's no dirt. I lived a blameless life. So
I'll tell you what, Julie was always really a good girl. She really was. She still is, so it's kind of hard to get her. We've known each other. We grew up in the Princeton, New Jersey area, so I'm a kind of a Jersey girl. Bucks County, Pennsylvania, Jersey girl. And anyway, so followed the route of a traditional physician technically and went into internal medicine as a prerequisite to get into a specialty, which is autoimmune disease, rheumatology. I went on to do that mostly in New York, Philadelphia, New York. And then also went on to do integrative medicine, which is kind of a holistic way of doing medicine through diet, nutrition, evidence-based material, not wacky, not fringe, 2 years training, and board certified in integrative medicine. And then somehow ended up getting into environmental health, kind of really through happenstance. My dog got ill. It's in a TED Talk that I did in December, which is accessible through YouTube. But my dog got sick, and this was about 8-9 years ago, and I couldn't figure out why, and I was heartbroken. Because at the time I had young kids, but I loved the dog better than the kids at the time. So I was really heartbroken and, had to really figure out what might have caused him to get sick so young with such an unusual autoimmune hepatitis, autoimmune liver disease. And then I ended up discovering sort of the lack of regulation for this. And, oh, my God, these chemicals in our human food and these chemicals are in our drinking water. And, oh, my God, it's what we put on our skin. And I was just kind of floored. And my career kind of took a little bit of a tangent into that world. That's really
so you have a book coming out, but before we get to the book, I want to talk about what's happening in the world right now, because obviously nobody better to talk to than a doctor. I'm sitting in New York as we speak. Aly, I know you're in New Jersey. Emily, are you still stuck down in Florida in your home state?
Yes.
We can make fun of you later for that. But the reality is, I think there's a lot of information out there about what's happening with the coronavirus, how it's transmitted, how it's affecting people differently, how it's not affecting some people at all. They may be carriers and not even know that they have it. I know that I signed up as somebody who thinks she had it, but was not able to get tested, signed up at a hospital here in New York to get my antibodies tested to see if the plasma from my blood could be used to treat patients who are undergoing it now. So I think there's a lot of information out there that people just have coming at them without any kind of understanding of what's true, what's factually not true. Can you just, as a doctor, walk anybody listening to this through what we're experiencing now, how long you think this can go on for, what the typical recovery rate is for this, whether Donald Trump is right that we have to alternatively either open up by Easter or potentially hunker down for the next 2 to 3 months? What's going on?
Well, a lot of questions that you just asked, but that's actually a lot of questions that we're all asking ourselves, even the healthcare fields. I follow some pretty intense conversations through avenues that are pretty restricted to physicians and healthcare workers. So I think I'm also getting a lot of information that the general public is not getting, maybe for good reason, because there's a lot of really scary information that happens to be true. I think what's really, I think most of us have already wrapped our heads around the fact that this is not going to go away anytime soon, that because we are still kind of unknowingly, in many ways, infecting other people, that there's this ripple effect that doesn't seem to be able to contain the issue. We're seeing this in areas where we think no one's affected, and then all of a sudden there's sort of this ramping up of infections very quickly. And that's the problem, because we've run out of resources in certain areas, or at least we're going in that direction. Say New York, for instance, which has the most cases right now. Also, half of the deaths in the country at this point, unfortunately, due to COVID-19, are in New York City, in the New York City, area. What I think we need to think about, first of all, this is so unheard of that even epidemiologists and physicians are stumped. The fact that young people are now much more likely to get it than was originally thought, even children who are otherwise healthy has really made it a scary situation where we kind of tucked it away as an older person's illness, someone who might be immunocompromised or have a chronic illness. Problem is that most of this country has chronic illnesses. How many people have high blood pressure or have a history of stroke? How many people have diabetes that's either controlled or not controlled? I myself am an autoimmune disease specialist. So a good majority of my patients are immune compromised either because of their disease or because of the medications that I use intentionally and other rheumatologists or oncologists to suppress the immune system. So, we have this idea that we're all healthy except for a certain little subset, but that's not really true. So we're kind of all open for potential infection. Now, of course, most people, 80% is the going number, tend to resolve, as possibly you did, Julie, because it sounded like you had the COVID cough and you had sort of this unbelievable difficulty with breathing in deep breaths. Unfortunately, you're not a smoker, you're not a vapor, you're not a midnight toker, just kidding. But I mean, the idea is that you really were.
As far as you know, but no.
As far as I know.
We all snuck cigarettes together back in high school. Come on, let's not kid ourselves.
No, I was scared of my parents, deeply scared, so I didn't do anything wrong. But the idea is there is so to kind of narrow it down, who might be at risk that we're learning now, actually, which is interesting as it's being, as the data is ramping up and we're collecting information internationally from, Italy and cohorts in Seattle and China, of course, and there's a big sharing of information between healthcare practitioners, which has just unbelievably warmed my heart. But what we're learning now is people who may be at more risk are not just, people with immune compromised immune systems, elderly, but also obese patients has become a little bit of a subset. Those who might have had a history of smoking or vaping, which is our young population, of course. So we're starting to see different characteristics being teased out of the data. But in general, it serves us all really well and others well to stay inside and really not potentially infect others, even if you do have a low level or asymptomatic case.
But you see what happened in China, which is that I think Chinese data is a little hard to believe because obviously they're not the most open society, but let's assume that their data is right-ish and they were 2 to 3 months ahead of us. You see that there are potentially no new infections in Wuhan right now. I suspect they're going to start opening up the city if they haven't already. Is that a smart thing to do, considering that this thing can come roaring back, or is it better to just hunker down for some unforeseeable amount of time and wait for it to pass? Although I don't know when that time would be. Is there even a time frame from when it's safe to go outside again?
Well, 2 quick points. We know what happened in Hong Kong recently was that Hong Kong actually opened up their borders and allowed people to kind of come and go as they please, and numbers went up in terms of infection rate. We know that also with, I can't remember, one of the universities down south that opened up their doors thinking—
Liberty.
Thank you. Liberty.
Jerry Falwell, yes.
Yeah, Jerry Falwell's university. And of course, now we know the numbers are going up there with infection. The other characteristics that we're all hoping to see is whether or not seasonally and hot weather and high humidity can actually decrease the rate of spread, which would mean that in the United States and parts of Europe, that going into summer, we would see fewer cases, perhaps because people are outside and they're out and about and less spread as opposed to being.
But let me ask you about that, because Emily's down in Florida, which is hot and humid year round, including now, right? Emily, it's pretty hot down there.
I believe every time I go outside, I'm beating the virus.
It's still, that Florida's obviously had an explosion in places like Miami. So I hear that, and I hear that Donald Trump and others have said that obviously when the warm weather comes, it'll be potentially better. But how is that possible, considering that the southern United States are already hot and humid and they're experiencing this? Look at Atlanta, or not Atlanta, I believe it's Albany, Georgia, which is also warm and humid.
Australia was during their summer months. Of course, we had the fires, but we also saw a ramping up of infection. We know in the Philippines, there's a large number of cases. In fact, you may know that one of our friends from high school,
yes, horrible story.
Both parents died in the Philippines, which broke my heart. So, I think, and a very interesting string again on one of these Facebook feeds that has 90,000 healthcare physicians and high-level nursing and nurse practitioners all sharing information, all kind of putting together their minds as to how to treat patients by taking, ventilators outside of the room to save on PPE or personal protection equipment. All this different mind sharing, is that there was a string this morning that I was reading that had 300 comments about what people's theories are. And I think they were all very sound, but so many of them that it's almost like, well, what do we do? Because, we all have theories, but the data just hasn't panned out. It's so novel, this coronavirus. It's so novel, new, that even though it looks like the strain of MERS and it looks like the strain of SARS, it's actually its own, has its own fingerprint. And whether or not that's even going to be mutating into other fingerprints is another, or kind of mutating into sort of a difficult to treat virus, we're not sure. But again, it's all unfolding. And that's why I think there's so much radio silence from a lot of even my colleagues. We just don't know what to say before it's changed to some different information. So we'll see. We'll see how this plays out. I don't know. And I should say, Dr. Fauci is phenomenal. I met him years ago when I was just an underling med student. And I got to say, he was extraordinary back then. He created a lot of the research regarding HIV medications. And at the time, they called them protease inhibitors instead of protease inhibitors. And I just remember meeting him and knowing that this was the real deal. So I really am hoping that he stays, strongly in the picture because, he won't, sidestep or shortcut science. He just won't.
So eventually this will pass, and we will get back to our usual ailments. I was actually talking to somebody who chairs a hospital in your state, Aly, in New Jersey, and today, by sheer coincidence, about something else. And he said it's interesting that doctors who are not emergency room medicine doctors are kind of not having a great experience now because nobody's going to see them. Nobody's going to the hospital for anything other than COVID or an emergency. So that it's not something that doctors whose specialty is not to deal with that particular disease or emergency room doctor really has a lot going on right now. But eventually, hopefully, sooner rather than later, life will go back to normal and our normal lives will progress. And so you have a book coming out to deal with that and to deal with how to live a healthy life. And what I'm grateful for is that you wrote it for lay people like me who, as you know, had a very hard time in ninth grade biology, unlike you. So tell us about the book. Tell us about what you're trying to convince the American public about, because I know that you've been for years. You run an organization, a website, a Facebook group called The Smart Human, which basically goes around educating people starting in high school, right, about how to live a healthier, more sustainable life. So tell us about the book and tell us about your larger mission.
So thank you for that. The book that's coming out is the consumer version of the textbook that was written, I guess, a year and a half ago that took several years, which was called Integrative Environmental Medicine. And essentially what I'm trying to bring to light, along with 26 other doctors and biologists and toxicologists in that textbook, was really to show the world that we have a real problem with environmental exposures, particularly chemicals that are in the food we eat, chemicals that end up or contaminants, in drinking water, which has become kind of one of the most important talks that I give nationally is about our drinking water. Chemicals in personal care products that we put on our skin, we put on our children's skin, that we take, we just kind of assume that they're on the shelves and they're safe because they've made it to the shelves and we can all buy them, with easy access. But also exposures that people don't often think about that affect human health, such as radiation, cellular technology, all of our phones, our cell phones, our, smart homes and everything that's Wi-Fi. Things that are as simple as noise pollution, air pollution, how big cities are handling air pollution in terms of, mandating changes, because we now know that the links to human health conditions like asthma, or even long-term risks for depression, anxiety, just from air pollution or air quality. heart disease related to air quality issues. So the goal with the textbook, which was a real honor to be part of that group of intelligent scientists, was to really get the right facts out there in a format that was really meant for educators, doctors, and university students. And now I'll be doing the book that is the consumer version. The C-spot run, I'm at a bar drinking with friends, talking turkey about really what people really need to know and how easy it is. I mean, really the emphasis is on what to do. I'm the what to do gal. Okay. I want to teach people not only that there's a problem, which people need to know that it exists, whether or not it's regulation that's the problem, or it's the actual chemicals, or it's both, but it's what to do about it. It's really what can we all use as resources? How can we look up our personal care products, our lipsticks, our shampoos, and choose better choices, make better, safer choices? How do we filter our water in such an easy way?
Because when you mention that, it's also important to know about, because like right now with the water crisis in Flint or Newark, in the way for coronavirus to stop being spread is to wash your hands. I feel like it's also interconnected. So not knowing some of the issues that you're pointing out will exacerbate something like coronavirus now.
Yeah, it's an interesting, I know such a deep dive into drinking water and how the municipal tap systems work in this country, how many we have, how many of us are reliant on those water sources as well as well water, that I was actually wondering whether or not washing virus down the drain is actually something we should be concerned about. And from all that I can tell, I don't see how that could be an issue, because and this is just getting my mind thinking, because I see everything through this set of lenses that I think most people don't now, because it's just not something people generally think about, really. But yeah, I think that we need to think kind of globally about not only what we're doing in the moment, which is certainly based on fear and anxiety, and what we're doing with exposure to a virus. But what are we doing long term after this may pass, which I'm likely will pass? And what about all of the chemicals that we sprayed on our furniture and our doorknobs and our all of the really strong chemicals that we had to use to fight a virus that's toxic in its own right? And how are those exposures, which were problems before for human endocrine system or human health, going to now play into how we move forward and with these fears of infection? And I think it's a very interesting sociology question, because we now have different behaviors, and we might likely stick with those behaviors that don't always make us do the safest choices. That's all.
Well, it's interesting to me because you just listed, 5, 10 things to worry about on a daily basis that I think I don't walk around being worried about. I know you do, and I know this is something you've been focused on for a very long time. But I live in New York. I turn on my faucet. I have, a drink of water, and I don't worry about it. I ride the subway. I don't worry about it. I put on makeup, or for all the years that I was at Fox, people put makeup on me. I have no idea what was in this makeup. I really didn't have a choice of what the brand was or anything, any knowledge about it. I think if you were to go around thinking about this 24/7, you probably would go kind of mad because of all these concerns. So how do you even prioritize? How do you think about what your priorities should be in keeping yourself safe? Because, you mentioned, Emily, drinking water in a place like Newark, New Jersey. That's something I know a little bit about. And it's terrifying to me because with this drinking water is doing to these children, where the school systems have higher levels of lead than Flint, Michigan, is that you're raising a generation of kids who are not only going to be mentally impacted by this, but also will be more prone to violence as adults and other side effects of lead in water or lead in their system. That's not just existing today, but will be a problem for them generationally down the road. So how do you even begin to grasp as a doctor who's trying to educate people about this, where they should begin? Because if you think about water, then you think about makeup, and you think about spraying stuff on your doorknobs, and you think about everything else, the food that you put in your mouth, you're spending a lot of time.
Go bonkers.
Yeah, you go bonkers. So what do you do? How do you prioritize?
Yeah, I've been doing this for 8 years now, and I've been scared for 8 years. Just kidding. I've actually
Not. I know you. You have been scared for 8 years.
not scared enough to stop coloring my hair. So
Well, you're gonna have to, because guess what? Nobody's coloring our hair anymore, so the truth is gonna come out.
right. I want to do a story on simply all the blondes that are now turning into brunettes and how they feel about it. So I think that's pretty funny. But listen, you have to. What I've learned throughout this process is that you have to think about low-hanging fruit. And the things that are the low-hanging fruit are things that are not hard to change, that have risk, that are not hard to change as an individual. So I give the story of regulatory issues and different bills that were trying to be passed to clean up our personal care product chemicals, or drinking water regulation, which hasn't been changed since 1974 under the Safe Drinking Water Act, that only covers 91 chemicals in our municipal treatment plants, which is absurd, but no one really understands that. You can go upstream to all these regulatory issues, but what I found is you have to kind of find your own lane. And my lane was not to fight those big battles. I know many people that are doing that, and I hopefully will win most of them if they can. But I think what I'm trying to message to people is that you can do a lot as an individual that doesn't take money, that doesn't take excessive amounts of education. It's really meant for people to grab low-hanging fruit that are accessible, easy, smarter choices. And that's how the book is laid out, actually. A chapter on personal care products, chapter on food chemicals and food, a chapter on drinking water, a chapter on detox, which is not wackadoodle stuff, but it's really just how our bodies are innately built to break down chemicals and flush them out if you just give the human body a chance to do so through exercise and sauna and choosing correct foods and that kind of thing. So, I look at it myself as a test subject, because I knew very little about this topic 7 or 8 years ago when my dog got sick. And I look at myself as an average Joe trying to understand how to navigate through these very kind of complex issues. But my job really, as I see it, is to empower people to make simple, smart, practical, low-cost changes that have high-yield repercussions for health. And anyone can do these things that I'm recommending. And I'm vetting the sources and making sure that people are making choices based on good references and good information.
What's the single best thing that an average layperson can do to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish, other than buy your book, which we'll talk about in a minute? But what is the one thing that I can wake up tomorrow and do to change the trajectory of what you're talking about, which is putting toxins, unwittingly, I should say, not because I specifically want to put them into my system?
First thing is just get rid of the crap in your house. Most people don't realize that they're buying a lot of chemicals. They're bringing them into a home that they spend many, many hours in. So I say to patients, I say, get rid of all of the chemicals that you bring in. Air plug-ins, incense, cleaners that are filled with toxic chemicals that we spray on surfaces without even thinking about it, which aerates and stays in our home and gets in our dust and ends up on furniture that we touch and eat. Most, carpet cleaners, laundry detergents with extra chemicals, fabric softeners that we generally don't need, makeup that either we haven't vetted, which it's very easy to do that now, and buy safer, cleaner products. So the number one thing is not even buying anything. It's more about getting rid of what we even bring into the home, which saves money and helps us be healthier. So that's my number one recommendation, is kind of do a survey of your life, your home, and also what you put in, on, and around your bodies, and start cutting things back and really getting rid of things you just don't need. That's number one.
What's something that you cut out in the past 8 years during your, discovery through this? Is there something like huge that you cut out, or was it a lot of little things?
I changed my beer to organic beer.
Really?
Yes. And actually tastes delicious. You can get organic wine. No, really, that's one of the things that was on this journey. I mean, I started off with maybe some things that maybe many people have heard. I stopped microwaving or heating any food or drinks in plastic, because plastic as a material is really not very tough. It's not really strong. You can figure that out when you put in Tupperware into a a dishwasher clear and it comes out, opaque and you can't see through it. So that's telling you that the material itself is breaking down and probably getting into the food, which those are endocrine disrupting chemicals in plastics that affect your endocrine system. So it can affect growth and risk for endocrine cancers like breast cancer, thyroid, prostate, uterine cancers, but it also can affect just thyroid disease. I mean, how many people now have hyper or hypothyroidism or thyroid cancer, even at very young ages, which never used to exist. I think just starting off with basic changes like heating plastics, avoiding heating in plastics, transferring to glass, or carrying food in stainless steel, getting rid of non-stick pans, which actually do scrape off those chemicals into food. So you want to just go with stainless steel or glass. I'm a big fan of filtering water. As I mentioned, that's become as I made a deep dive into that topic, it's been extraordinary. And, I think people really don't know the nuances. So just going back to the basics of if you have a pitcher or a faucet filter, that's pretty darn good. But if you can do an extreme filtration system, which only is about $300, off of Consumer Reports, make sure it's a very well-rated one. You can get a reverse osmosis water filter, which goes right under your sink. And so that's actually much more aggressive in its ability to pull contaminants out. So that's another good one to think about, because by volume, we drink more water than we even eat food. So when you're talking about just exposure amounts, water should really be at the top of people's lists. But other things to think about, canned foods. Unfortunately, for some socioeconomic groups, we have to, think about messaging. At least that's how I message on The Smart Human, which is where I get a lot of information out to everyday people. Canned foods have a liner of plastic in every can, whether it's your favorite diet soda or it's, canned tomatoes or peaches. Any cans typically have a liner of plastic that's made with bisphenol A or BPA, which we now know is a strong, or it's kind of the poster child for endocrine disruption, because there's just so much international and national material on this particular chemical as an endocrine disruptor. But pretty much 99.99% of cans are made with this plastic liner. So if you can move to frozens, either fresh foods or frozen, I like frozen organics, which are cheaper and still maintain all their nutrients, and just transfer those frozens into glass or stainless steel, you can get the benefits of the food and avoid the plastic chemical, contamination.
You raised this interesting question, which is that I remember when I when I was pregnant and you start doing all this research, you probably remember this with your first child, you do a lot of research. I think by the time people have their second or third kids, they kind of don't bother anymore. But BPA was not allowed in bottles or in baby formula. But as you mentioned, it's still allowed in cans of soda and other issues. And I think people don't grasp how much the FDA approves stuff that is just awful for you. I mean, NutraSweet is Exhibit A. NutraSweet would never have gotten approved if they hadn't had a very good lobbyist back in the 1970s named Donald Rumsfeld, who got it approved. And as a result, that's why we were all drinking Diet Coke and other NutraSweet components that really are supposedly not great for you, right?
That is correct. I mean, technically speaking, we have a broken system. I mean, anyone you talk to in the research of endocrine disruption will tell you this, that we allow absolutely no regulation for personal care products at all. So everything that ends up on the store shelf has had no required testing for safety or toxicity. Food chemicals have very weak system. They follow laws that go under the acronym GRAS, or generally regarded as safe, which means that thousands of chemicals were actually grandfathered in under that law as a food additive. And we now have over 3,000 food additive chemicals that are allowable without any testing. So, really we're talking about a broken system, and it's up to the consumer. Unfortunately, people who may not even have any background in science or chemistry, or did badly in chemistry, Julie, in high school. So, anyone...
Right. Exhibit A.
said it, not me, or biology. I don't know.
You don't want me approving anything, but okay, go ahead.
You ended up in the right field, Julie. And so did I.
Yes, I ended up in the field of nobody's hiring me to save anybody's life, but go ahead.
You do political. Anyway, the point is that because the system is really so broken and frustrating, at least for me as a consumer, I've decided just, we got to let people fight the fight in their lane. And I'm going to, clearly make choices based on studies that are done through scientists, not through manufacturers, and really try to find the people that do this work, like Fred von Saal, who's my co-author. Interestingly enough, he is the guy, the hero, along with all his colleagues that got BPA out of baby bottles. So he is my actual co-author on both the textbook and this upcoming consumer book. So he's the real deal, and I'm honored to work with him. But these are the scientists that really do this because it's their calling. They work for university systems. They have a very tight-knit group of scientists that keep their information very tightly guarded because there's so many lobbyists and so many American Chemical Council and all the different groups that are trying to certainly block the findings that they're coming up with. So, it's a battle. It's a battle on every front when it comes to money and the power of the food industry in this country.
Well, okay, 2 more things before we have to go. 1, what's the name of the book? Where and when can we get it?
Name of the book is called Non-Toxic: Guide to Living Healthy in a Chemical World.
Right.
It is available for pre-order now, barnesandnobles.com, amazon.com. And it should be coming out September 1st, August 20th, somewhere in that range. It's pretty exciting because I think my heart is in this book, and I think the information is just invaluable for people moving forward. We will get through COVID-19, and then we have to get back into the idea that we are going to live, who hopefully are healthy and strong, will live, a healthy life, and they want to just make these changes because they're really easy and worthwhile.
All right, Emily, 2 truths and a lie. I think Aly's ready.
Are you ready? 2 truths and a lie.
2 truths and a lie.
I look forward to beating Julie for once.
I have an almost perfect. I think I only got 1 wrong of all the guests that we've had, so I've got a almost perfect score here. So go, and I know you really well for a long time.
That was what I was telling Emily. That could be a problem. But here, I'll try to come up with a couple. So number 1, I think I might have spoken on one. Okay. There have only been 5 chemicals that have been removed in this country since 1976 off the market is number 1. Number 2, I was a paramedic during my college years, so I trained to do that. And number 3, I tried out for a part of Annie on Broadway when I was a young little whippersnapper.
Go ahead, Emily.
I'm going to say the lie is the first one about the 5 things that were...
I'm going to say Annie because I've never heard that story. I'm going to be really bummed if I never heard it, but go ahead.
Okay. So, yes, I did try out for Annie.
What?
And when I didn't get the part, I cried, and I remember that clearly. I was in the bathroom.
Did you have an agent? How did you try out for Annie?
I was like a little stage kid. I was everywhere. I was trying, my mother threw me into every audition, and I was even dressed in knickers, a red shirt, and she curled my hair like everyone else.
Are you as I am that Aly Cohen, who became Annie in the movie, grew up in your hometown? Isn't she from Newtown, Pennsylvania?
Yeah, she had the same singing teacher as me, Russ Faith.
You're kidding.
And same with Joey Lawrence, just in case you wanted to know that.
Really?
Yeah, the Lawrence brothers had the same singing teacher in Newtown, Pennsylvania.
So how come they made it big and you're hanging out with us?
Julie, I am pissed.
My dream in life was to be Annie. I used to watch that movie over and over and over again. I just watched it with my son, who was not as a
documentary. I'm not so sure it was so great to be such a, these child stars. I'm just using that as an excuse, but
No, right. You're busy saving the world now. Right. I can't believe the one truth and a lie that I messed up was the one from one of my oldest friends. Wait, what's the
lie was that I wasn't a paramedic in college.
I was wrong too. Again.
I was in high school.
Don't worry.
I was an emergency medical person in high school at age 16.
You were? Are you allowed? I didn't know that. Really?
Yeah, I
No,
trained.
no
My
idea.
first night as an ambulance EMT was a shooting in Trenton. First night.
Really?
Yep.
Yikes. All right. We got to do this quickly because I have a virtual soccer class that I have to take my son to, translation from my computer. But what's making you salty, Emily, this week?
A lot of the Floridians, I just went on a run and they're still playing basketball, like a group of 10 people. And I want to get a water gun and just spray everybody down and be like, move, move, move. So.
Well, I'm looking out at my colleagues and thinking they need better protection. And we're talking nurses, we're talking doctors, we're talking respiratory techs, custodial, we're talking the people that are frontline people. And it's breaking my heart to watch this. So that's making me more than salty.
Well, mine is not as altruistic as both of yours. I'm repeating second grade for the second time in my life, and I didn't sign up for this nonsense, and that's making me salty. On that note, I gotta go. Love you both. Great seeing you both. See you, everybody. See you next week.